Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Ernie Salomon-Live. I'd like to welcome you to the show again on this beautiful evening in Santa Barbara. I'd like, as always, to thank our director, Fred Winter, and our audio director, Ali Adamek, without whom, trust me, we couldn't get this show out every week the way we do. And both of these folks make it possible for me to talk to you, because without them I couldn't do it, and I can't thank them enough for staying with me all these years through all my foibles and making the show possible. We work hard every week to bring you a good show, and we bring you more information than a lot of the jabber on the networks where you get sound bites. Here you get a pretty elongated view of any subject matter. This particular show will broadcast tonight at 7 o'clock, as we are on now, Friday at 5 o'clock in the morning, Sunday at 7 o'clock at night, and Monday at 11 o'clock in the morning. You can check the Santa Barbara News Press and www.sbchannels.tv for any listings of extra broadcast times that we're going to have on this show as a time available is made to us. We're again streaming live on Wednesday nights, and we've got a complete library of many of our shows on www.ustream.tv/channel/Ernie-Salomon. So if you want to watch it on the internet, you can. If you can't watch it tonight, or have a friend that hasn't seen the show tonight, doesn't want to watch it on television, you can catch it on Ustream. We've got a whole library there. Our guest tonight is Professor Nelson Lichtenstein, who is a labor historian and a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Before we get started on the serious problems that others are having around the country, I want to talk a little bit about a serious illness that one of our friends is having, and that's Jerry Roberts, who was the former editor of the San Francisco Chronicle and the News Press. And we're dedicating tonight's program to Jerry. He is up in San Francisco at the University of California Hospital in San Francisco, which is located on Parnassus Avenue in San Francisco. And he's starting to get chemotherapy. He's sleeping well, and he's going through a long process. I got an email from his wife, and I'm paraphrasing as I go through here. And as one of the girls said, we're hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. They're testing his DNA to make sure they give him the exact chemo regimen that he is getting. And his wife Linda writes, "We watched the sunset and the lights of the city come on last night. It's the most beautiful view from this room of the Golden Gate to the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, Angel Islands, and the East Bay to the downtown hills. Not a bad evening ritual, even without the beer and pretzels." I wrote back, there are rooms that are a lot cheaper and have better amenities than a hospital room to get the same views in San Francisco. Jerry is planning to put up a Facebook page, and he's reading his email, but right now Linda is reading his email to him. And please, if you do write him or contact him, we'd like you to send him encouraging and positive words and any gossip and good stuff that'll make him laugh. If you don't get an answer, don't be concerned, because Linda and Jerry are getting a lot of letters back and forth and phone calls. Jerry recently won $1 million judgment against Wendy McCall for his illegal termination from the news press, and Mrs. McCall has appealed several times, but she is near the end of her proverbial rope. He's battled cancer for most of the time he's battled Mrs. McCall, and the thing that upsets me more than anything else is that Wendy McCall knew that this was a sick man, but she and her money did not stop trying to keep him from getting his judgment that he won fair and square. So if you want to contact Jerry Roberts, please do so, but please do so in an intelligent manner. Make sure that you say stuff that's uplifting. I want to talk a little bit about the Romney men. I call them the chicken hawks. These guys are with those that advocate the loudest and present the most moral arguments for war, those guys are always questionable to me. And now I come to the advocates of continual war that continue to use every means at their disposal to avoid serving in the military, especially when there's a war going on that they sometimes stop, but always support. Both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were advocated and started by a group of men that avoided the draft during the Vietnam War. Or, in the case of President George W. Bush, unlike his World War II hero father, he got himself moved around the country while in the Air National Guard. Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Dennis Rumsfeld, and most of Bush's entire Let's Go to War cast all avoided the Vietnam draft with college deferments. Send some poor kid off to get maimed or die, but not us. I believe that Mitt Romney's a hypocrite. In 1966, he was photographed protesting against the sit-ins and in favor of the Vietnam War draft while going to Stanford. He went there for one term, and then he shuffled off to France, living in the lap of luxury as a Mormon missionary, safely exempt from the draft. Mormon missionaries don't do much more than sign up people to join the Mormon church so that they can become Mormon missionaries. Not one man in the Romney family, from his grandfather, his father, Romney himself, his 4 sons, none of those has ever served in the U.S. military. These are the same fathers and sons who want to start a war with Iran and send even more sons and daughters of other people off to war. They're willing to die up until the next guy's children. Last week on The View, which I saw, on which Mitt Romney chickened out and didn't appear, which I didn't see him there, Whoopi Goldberg asked Mrs. Romney about the lack of Romney family's military service. Mrs. Romney's body and demeanor became tight as a drum, and she answered, quote, "Romney men serve our country in other ways than in the military." That's her quote, not mine. Mrs. Romney should have added that over many generations that Romney men don't like the sight of blood, especially their own. So I get very nervous when politicians and people in our government are pro-war but don't want to go fight or die themselves or even get maimed or even come out alive, because in the old days, the rich and the wealthy people in this country and the shakers and the movers, they all went to war. Teddy Roosevelt went to war. His 2 sons were killed, one in World War I, one in World War II. Teddy Roosevelt Jr. killed in World War II, Quentin in World War I. President Roosevelt's sons were in the military. Harry Truman was in the military. Jack Kennedy was in the military. Nixon was in the military. President Johnson was in the military. Joe Biden's son was in the military. So things are changing now where you want to start wars, but you don't want to have anybody in your family involved in them. So think about that if you haven't voted yet. I just couldn't vote for a guy that wants to have other sons killed but won't sacrifice anyone in their family. And now I'd like to welcome you, Nelson Lichten.
Thanks.
And would like to welcome you to the show. You're a labor historian. You teach at UCSB. You are probably the foremost expert on Walmart, the merchant of death. And we've talked before about the Walmarting of America's workers and governors and anti-labor legislators working to get rid of collective bargaining in order to suppress workers' wages and benefits, even as the rich get richer. You wrote a book, The Retail Revolution, How Walmart Created a Brave New World of Business. You've written The State of the Union, A Century of American Labor, and also Walmart, The Face of 21st Century Capitalism. You serve as the director of UCSB's Center for the Study of Work, Labor, and Democracy, which is trying to expand the public understanding and discussion of important issues facing working people. And so I would just like to welcome you to the show, and I want to talk to you about the Walmarting of America. Welcome again.
Happy to do so. Happy to do it.
Huh?
Happy to talk to you about any and all topics.
I know. Let's talk about the place where the middle class in our country is today. The idea of a large and stable middle class, which I call the working class, is central to America's sense of itself. In the last 40 years, the middle class has shrunk from 61% down to 51%, even as middle classes in other countries, even third world countries, are growing. The upper income group, which accounts for about 20% of all Americans, has had its share of income grow from 20 to 46%, while the middle class's share of income has dropped from 62% to 45%. And since the year 2000, the median income for the middle class has fallen from $73,000, this is for a family, $73,000 a year to $69,000 a year, with their net wealth dropping by a whopping 27% in the bargain. And real income is about the same as it was over 30 years ago, and I've used this term many times. It doesn't look good. Can you tell me, Nelson, what's going on here?
Well, you certainly got all the facts and figures there. That's true. I think the New York Times this morning had a big article also about the stagnation or decline of income since the year 2000. This is a bipartisan thing. And that's certainly the case for what we call the middle class. I noticed you used the word working class, and I think that is a more accurate phrase. By working class, I don't just mean blue-collar workers or factory workers. I mean anyone who works for a salary.
People that go out and every morning and gets a check.
Middle class is a little vague, but we're stuck with that phrase, so let's use it because all the politicians do and everyone else does. Okay, so what's happening? Why is this the case? Well, there are lots of culprits. I mean, I think in the largest sense, one thing is, you say, well, the Chinese or cheap labor, or the Vietnamese, or Bangladesh, and there's a certain truth to that. We've lost thousands and thousands of factories and factory jobs of people who say manufacturing shoes or electronics or things of that sort, and those have all been offshored. That's part of it. I think. But that's only part of it, and I think that we can often too much overemphasize the extent to which international trade, Walmart getting all of its basically manufacturing all of its things it sells in China. We can overemphasize that. That's important, but that's not the main thing. I think the main question is that first companies. And then actually governments, of various sorts, aping companies, following the way that, corporate America has gone, they've come to the conclusion that there's no penalty in simply, paying people, either the same or declining amount every year. And one of the main ways, you mentioned the gross family median income dropping from 71 to 69, which is all true. But even more important than that is the erosion of things like benefits, retirement benefits.
The whole pack.
I mean, right. And health.
I call it the Walmarting of America, as you know, because they go down as low as they can get, and when they get to the bottom, they start digging to go even lower.
So the erosion and evaporation of those things that made a sort of life secure and predictable, that is having a pension. Most private companies, which used to pay pensions to, defined benefit pensions, that is, you knew what you were going to get, to 70% of the workforce back in the 70s. Today, almost all pensions are defined contribution, which means in effect you're gambling. You're putting the money in the stock market, and that's dropped to.
Well, we saw what happened with that.
Well, right, of course.
A few years ago.
Everyone's pensions. Okay, that's one thing. So that's a when you think about your life, it's not just the gross income you get, but it's the sense of a secure future. And the older you get, that's more important. So that's one thing. The second is health insurance. It used to be that both health insurance was both less expensive, and that more companies and governments, for that matter, as a natural part of the job, they gave you health insurance. That's also been shrinking. So those things actually, they are really income, that is the pension or health insurance, those things are evaporating. And so as much as the gross wages that's declining, those are declining. So those are part of it. Now, I think part of this is simply that executives, corporations, people even in government, they can get away with it. We have a chronic unemployment in this country and lots of underemployment, and some companies have sort of institutionalized that. So in the
Well,
service,
we've allowed untold millions
Right.
to come across
Well-
the border, and the reason for that is that both big business and the government want as much cheap labor as they can
They
get
do.
because it keeps down wages and holds down inflation.
I think that's true and again, in the article this morning, that there is, for those people who have a high school education or less,
Trouble.
the immigration may be restraining their wages. However, I don't think that in general, when you talk about the middle class, say people who work for an insurance company, people who work school teachers, people who work for a city and state government, immigration does not impact their wages.
Well, I think it does
yeah,
to a degree
but-
because it funnels up. But I want to move on to something else.
Yes, sure.
Between 1979 and 2007,
Yeah, right.
after-tax income
Right.
for the top 1% Americans grew by 275%. Are you listening, Governor Romney? And it grew by 65% for the next 19% of people and by just 40% for the next 60% of households, and only 18% for the bottom 20%. Without throwing out too many numbers, in the 25 years between 1980 and 2005, more than 80% of the total increase of income went to the top 1%
right.
of America's household. Mr. Romney, are you listening? What do you attribute this to? What do you attribute
Okay.
this huge disparity when the top guys got 80% of the improvement in their income? That only leaves 20% for the workers and the poor people, the working poor.
Right. Well, two things. I mean, two or three things. One is the financial sector in the United States has grown by leaps and bounds. That is the number of people on Wall Street, the number of people trading bonds, stocks, derivatives, and everything else. And partly that's a result of deregulation, an ideology of the Republican right beginning in the late 70s to deregulate Wall Street. And that has provided enormous opportunities for people to get extremely wealthy. So hedge fund, people don't think nothing of paying themselves, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. There's a kind of social norm that's been broken in that respect. It used to be that even the president of General Motors, which was a huge, back in the 50s and 60s, a huge corporation, they feared to pay themselves, say, more than 20 or 30 times what an ordinary worker was getting because that was seen as politically unacceptable, morally unacceptable. Today, that's not the case. The second reason is this, that institutions in our society which used to constrain and make politically embarrassing and morally embarrassing those individuals who received great wealth, institutions like a vibrant civil rights movement and a labor movement, these institutions have either decayed or evaporated or simply become much weaker. And so, I mean, for example, a union movement didn't just help its members by bargaining for an extra $1, an hour at the bargaining table, although it did do that. That was important. But it also was a political force which, for example, sustained a fair tax system, a political force which embarrassed politically the corporate executives when they seemed to be getting out of line.
Well,
and so it was a kind of, everyone knew someone else.
I've got some numbers on that.
Yeah. And so,
In 1950,
yeah.
everybody relates to baseball. The top major league ball players in this country earned about 4 times the wages of the average working family, whatever that was.
Yeah, right.
Today,
Okay. Yeah, right.
Today, a major league ball player earns 70 times more.
Right.
But the interesting thing is
they
that minor league players only earn $850 a month. Now, in the
Right.
70s,
Right.
CEOs of our top companies were paid
Yeah, right.
30 times the pay of workers.
Yeah.
In 2010, it was $243 times.
Right, and what I'm
Now,
saying,
there's a great disparity that's growing.
The baseball player is a very good example because, although I'm not a baseball aficionado, I'm fairly certain that baseball players, they were great in 1950 and they're great today. They aren't, 50 times better. But what it reflects is a sort of social norm that was in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s. Equality of income was a social norm, and it was enforced not just by, sermons in churches or synagogues about, everyone being equal. It was enforced by political institutions, which could in effect, create a penalty for those who transgress that norm. And I think that as I say, the civil rights movement was one such institution. The labor movement was another. Much discussion, by the way, of course, on the right, of labor bosses. We could get into that if you'd like, but no labor boss, no matter how powerful, no labor leader earns 20 or 30 times more than their membership. They earn maybe twice or three times. That's considered a lot. They don't earn that much. But clearly, in even companies we admire, Google, Apple, Microsoft, the CEOs of these companies earn enormous amounts more. I don't think that their incentive would be reduced if the ratio of what they earned was cut somewhat. I think they'd still be quite inventive people.
But during that time, which is an interesting, during that time where all these salaries are going up for all these big shots is 1%. Everybody else is going in the other direction.
Right.
The biggest enemy of working people today, to me, is technology, and the reason for that is that more and more jobs that were done by humans are now being done by machines. And the best example that I can give in robots is car manufacturing, where robots make a lot more of the car today than they did 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. The problem is that robots don't get paid, they don't get sick, they don't go on vacations, but they don't buy cars either. What are workers going to do to compete today with the automation of the technology age? Because there are a lot of manufacturing jobs, regardless of what Mr. Romney says, and regardless of what Mr. Obama says, they're not coming back.
Right. I would put it a little different, Ernie. A little differently, Ernie. Yes, it's true that the automobile industry is much more productive than it used to be. I was showing a film in my class of the 1914 assembly line, and what struck me, and this also struck me when I visited China, was the fact that you had workers shoulder to shoulder, hundreds and hundreds of workers just using their hands. And this was also the case in China when I visited an assembly line there. Today, workers are there are many fewer of them and more machines. But it's not simply this, that a machine one day comes in and is installed and replaces a worker. It's much slower than that. And the real problem, and it's not just automobile factories, it's also in banking or in retail, is that I think it's great that we have technological progress. I think it's great that we have that Walmart is much more efficient than the old A&P, that the modern Ford plant is much more efficient than the old one. That's great. The problem is that workers and the middle class in general don't share in the productivity dividend that these new machines create. Now, let me give you.
They've gotten less jobs and lower paying jobs.
Now, let me give you an example of a group of workers in this country who have shared in the productivity dividend, and many people are saying will be quite alarmed that they have because they think they're getting overpaid. These are the longshoremen of the Pacific Coast. A technological revolution took place in the last 50 years in San Francisco, San Pedro, LA, etc. It was containerization, which is increased productivity of the average longshoreman by 10, 20, 50, 100%. I mean, 100 times. It's fantastic.
My dad belonged to the ILWU.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, the members of longshoremen back in the 30s and 40s were the scum of the earth. Drunkards and derelicts, and they lived on Skid Row and etc. back in the 30s. They, through their union, they became respectable. They started, earning
Through
money.
Harry Bridges.
And right, Harry Bridges, once a communist. But anyway, and then in 1960, they signed an agreement called the Mechanization and Modernization Agreement, which said, containerization, yes, bring it on, but we will get a share of the productivity increases. So what do longshoremen today earn?
A lot.
They can earn easily $100,000 a year. They can earn maybe even $200,000 a year. Now,
And they have benefits.
That's right. And now and they can shut down the ports if they choose on occasion. Now, I've been on the phone with reporters and whatnot and say, what is this? Blue collar workers? They don't even they have a high school education. Maybe they're at a junior college or something. They're earning $100,000 with a great pension. And I say, yes, I think other people should be earning that much. And if the clerks at Walmart had got their share of the genius and the organizational verstance of a Sam Walton, they would be earning $50,000 a year.
But Walmart has privatized their profits and socialized their costs
that's right.
Most Walmart workers are on welfare.
Well,
many
of them are.
A lot of them, a great many of them.
But
My nephew's on welfare. He works for Walmart. He supervises 8 guys, gets $9 an hour.
Right.
He's on Medicaid. He gets aid to dependent family. He gets all, and he gets a tax rebate.
And when he rings up a sale, if he does, that cash register he uses is connected to one of the largest computers in the world, and a extremely sophisticated system.
But that doesn't help
him.
No,
that's right. That's exactly. But I want to say, I think here's one of the problems of America today, that you will find that a lot of people resent those longshoremen who are earning that money. Rather than saying, we could do that too, they say,
you know what that
they
is?
say they shouldn't be earning it because I'm struggling here.
Yeah, you know what that is? I'll tell you exactly what that is, Nelson. If I can't have that woman, nobody else can either. Mm-hmm. And what it is, it's the same thing with pensions and for state and local, public workers.
Right.
A lot of people are against that. I'm not. I think some of the systems are crazy, and we can talk about those. But I think everybody in this country should have a pension.
Right. Right.
And so what workers are saying is, well, I don't get a pension. I've got a 901, 401k. Right. Why should that guy have a pension? Right. Why should that guy have good wages? I don't have good wages. Right. It's jealousy.
Let me say, Ernie, that I think that kind of resentment, which you and I can deplore, and say, well, why don't you get smart and realize,
But it's fostered by government.
Well, it is. It's fostered by various opinion makers, and I think in a period of where you don't have political hope, where you don't have political leadership which shows you a way out, you're going to end up with that kind of resentment, and it's very demoralizing.
Joseph Stiglitz,
yes.
Columbia University. Mm-hmm. I agree with a lot of the stuff he says. He says that our way of life, our middle class, our retirement, our country continues to be stolen by 1% of the population. He says this is becoming a country of the rich, by the rich, for the rich. And this is a direct quote from Professor Stiglitz, who's not a dummy. The more unequal a society is, the more reluctant the wealthy become to spend on common needs. The rich don't need government benefits. They can buy those things for themselves. That's why guys like Romney and Ryan keep talking against Obamacare. They keep talking against social service programs, Medicare, you name it. Why? Because rich people don't need Medicare. Rich people don't need Social Security. Rich people don't need Medi-Cal or Medicaid. Rich people don't need government help. Rich people buy all that stuff for themselves. So why should I pay taxes to give it to somebody else that needs it?
Well, that's right. That is their idea.
That's the real reasons that the far right are attacking all these programs. And I've said it before. These guys are attacking these programs, Nelson, because they don't need them. And if they needed them, now I don't see them yelling against subsidies for rich farmers. I don't see them yelling against crazy tax breaks for wealthy companies. I mean, General Electric in 2009, they didn't pay a penny in federal income tax. I don't see Romney saying we've got to get General Electric.
Well, I mean, I agree with you 100% on that, but I think the point, I think you're slightly off the point. I'll tell you why I think that. We can agree on that, And I think your analysis is correct. But the issue is, at least for the political future, well, the next 13 days, isn't it, is why is it that in the crucial states, Ohio or whatnot, you have, people who are struggling, having difficulties, and yet apparently the polls show they're going to vote half and half. Lots and lots of working
Northern
people.
Ohio is liberal, which I don't consider to be a dirty word. Working people, and Southern Ohio is more of a Southern mentality, conservative.
But I mean, there have been other moments when Southern workers have joined unions and done all sorts of things. I think part of the problem is that. And I agree that the wealthy should be taxed more heavily. However, simply basing your political program on higher taxes for the rich is not enough.
Not going to help.
Not enough. It's not enough because it has a kind of theoretical position for most people. One thing that I would fault Obama for is not making part of his explicit program for the next 4 years. I'm going to vote for Obama, but would be a rise in the minimum wage, which is extremely popular, and would have a direct, immediate impact on the take-home pay and the living standard of millions and millions of people, including these hard-pressed Ohioans and everyone else.
The minimum wage today is worth about $3 or $4 an hour.
It's 1/3 less than it was 30 years ago.
It's
it's not worthless. It's
worthless as far as the costs.
But raising it now, the reason I think he doesn't do that is because he's conceded rhetorically to Romney that he is the main defender of small business. And as soon as you said, I'm going to raise the minimum wage, Romney and others would say, and small businessmen, some would, or their spokesman would say, oh, you're going to hurt us. But I think that that is, and he may well propose it if he's reelected, but I think that would be a something that it's been shown that in the red states and the blue, the minimum wage is very popular, including among Romney supporters, among conservatives.
Companies are continuing to dump workers onto welfare rolls. And in fact, at Walmart, as you know, they were teaching people how to get into the welfare system. They had computers in their back room. How to, so they privatized their profits, socialized their costs. They've kept the wages down. So people, in Clark County, some years ago, the biggest users of the emergency hospital were Walmart employees. And then this idiot Romney says, well, we don't need insurance for everybody. Nobody's going to die in their apartment. They go to the emergency hospital. Who in the hell pays for that? You, me, and all the other Americans out there that are insured. I mean, the Heritage Foundation, those guys were for the individual mandate. They were for it. Romney was told when he was in Massachusetts, you've got to have the individual mandate because it won't work without it. He even got $400 million in federal money to get this program started. The minute that President Obama, and he was against the mandate originally. The minute that President Obama was induced by his advisors to say, look, Mr. President, this program will not work without a mandate for insurance, he said, okay, I'll buy him. When that happened, the Heritage Foundation and everybody else on the right that was for it, all of a sudden, miraculously, were against it.
Yeah, let me take this opportunity to say why I think the Obamacare is a very good program. I think probably a lot of your viewers were maybe disappointed that Obamacare wasn't single payer or didn't have a public option. I agree. I would have preferred that as well. But I do think, just as it stands, it will have a tremendous impact on the lives of middle-class people, poor people, and I think one thing which is not covered very much, not discussed, is Medicaid. Medicaid, which we now think of as kind of a program for the poor, not very good, et cetera. Medicaid will cover an additional 15 million people with Obamacare when it comes in, and in addition, Medicaid, that's for everyone, will have much better standards. It will cover more people, and the standards of what you get will be increased, so that in effect, for people, for a family of 3 earning as much as $30,000 a year, which isn't very much, but they will be covered by Medicaid. It will be as if they're living in Canada. In other words, it will be a single payer federal program of insurance for them, no questions asked. It'll have a tremendous impact on millions and millions of people. And you know where the most of the impact will be? In South Texas, in the Central Valley, in the Central Valley of California, in areas of the Florida Panhandle, where the people are the poorest and where the system now is terrible. And tremendous amounts of money will flow to those areas.
Romney says, I don't want the government in the healthcare business.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell are they doing in Massachusetts? They are the healthcare business.
But I just wanted to make your viewers. I think
you've got pre-existing
should vote for Obama because
pre-existing conditions. Well, Romney said, "Well, I cover pre-existing." Yeah, if once you're insured, we cover. Well, I had prostate cancer when I was 69 years old. That's a pre-existing condition. Right. The insurance company came to me recently and said, "We got some new plans for you." Yeah. The only problem the thing they didn't tell me is if you go into the new plan and you want to go back to the good plan, the Plan F that I have, I have to go pass a medical underwriting, which they won't pass me on because I have a pre-existing condition. And that law, the Obamacare law, does not apply to Medicare contracts. Let me talk about unions a bit.
I think it does. It will, Ernie. That the pre-existing condition question will be off the table for the entire population. That was a crucial thing.
But if you go from one program to another with an insurance company, and you go to Plan F and then go to Plan F with a high deductible, and you want to go back to the regular Plan F, you have to go through medical underwriting, and they have a chance to cancel you out. I know that as a fact because I had an insurance expert sitting here 2 weeks ago. Okay, unions.
Sure.
I believe that unions, personally, my dad belonged to the International Longshoremen Warehouseman Union. I met Harry Bridges when I was a little boy.
For you.
I have my dad's union book. I have his strike card. I've got everything he had. He worked in a defense plant. He was involved in the 1946 general strike in San Francisco.
Wow.
They broke some heads.
Wow.
I believe that unions have brought more benefits to all American workers than most realize. Here are just a few. Safety on the job, the 40-hour work week, overtime, vacations, sick leave, health care, and until it was stolen, retirement benefits. Unions are now demonized by many working people and most employers. And I believe the unions have not done much to educate the public about the need for unions. Why have unions done such a lousy job of educating the American people, and why are so many American workers so anti-union today?
Those are very, very good questions. I think two answers to that. I think one is this question of resentment that we were talking about, and given the fact that most union jobs are somewhat better than others under the same set of circumstances, there's a kind of resentment that when you have sort of social stagnation and retreat, rather than people getting mad and being rebellious and moving to the left or something, they just simply resent those who've got it made. That's one answer. The second is that it is standard operating procedure in every company in the country, including those we used to think of as sort of moderate liberal companies, to in fact demonize. There's an industry that demonizes trade unionism, and to resist it. And the irony is, the weaker the union movement gets, the weaker it gets.
The worse off America's workers.
Well, no, but but the weaker it gets, the more it is resented and the more it is hated. And the reason for that is this: that if back in 1955, say, when every auto worker in America was in a union and every auto company was unionized, it didn't make any difference to Ford or General Motors if their workers were unionized, because they were all unionized, the same pay, so everything was standard. So instead they built bigger tail fins to compete. Today, if you're a employer and for whatever reason the workers in your shop or your office decide to form a union, and none of your competitors are unionized, you're going to fight like hell. You're going to say, why? Why are you coming after me? And you're going to hire an anti-union consultant, and they worked out a whole schema, and you're going to fight it like hell because you'll be put at a competitive disadvantage. And so the irony is, the weaker the unions get, the more they are hated, the more they are resented. Either resented from below by those people who aren't in the unions, or the employer says, hey, I don't want to be the only unionized firm in this industry, so I don't want it. Now, I think what it will require is something like the civil rights movement. Clearly a kind of movement which combines politics and morality, and which makes the case, which I think can be made, that that a trade union movement is good not just for its members, but for the entire community, for the entire country. And I think that's the argument that has to be made.
I believe that if this keeps going on in this country, and you and I, you're a younger man than I am, and I'm in my last 10% of being here. But I believe that if this keeps going on in this country, with the gutting of the middle class and the downward spiral of the American family financially, there will be a revolution here, and it's not going to be pretty. It will happen. Those 200 or 300 million guns are going to come out, and there will be a revolution. I'm not advocating it, but I think it's coming, but I won't be here to see it. But that's what's going to happen. Prop 32.
Yes, let's talk about it.
Prop 32 has been put on our state ballot by business interests.
Yes.
If it passes, unions will be prohibited from contributing to candidates, but it does nothing to stop billionaires and millionaires and PACs from contributing huge amounts to the candidates of their choice. And to me, it's another silver stake in the heart of unions. What are your views on Prop 32?
Well, I think I urge all your viewers to vote no on 32, because just as you said, it is in fact a scheme to allow the really wealthy people, wealthy corporations to sort of have the political terrain all to themselves. But I want to make a slightly different argument, another argument against 32 and in favor of unions using political money of their members to engage in politics. And it's this. Unions are not simply insurance companies which you join and they get you higher wages. They are not simply another business which maybe is liberal rather than conservative. What unions are, they embody in an institution which is actually sanctioned by the government the idea of social solidarity. That is the idea that people who don't have much in the society, who work for someone else, can make advances by doing things together. And when you do something together, it's not that everyone sort of votes privately in some isolated individual way to whether to agree on something. You do it. You talk about it. You do things collectively. And I think the idea of unionism is that a certain kind of moral and political suasion is applied in the same way when you go to a church or a synagogue. There's certain ways of acting, and there's kind of a sense this is the way it should be done, and if you stray from that, you're off the path. So a union says solidarity. We have to be powerful. We have to do things together. Obviously, on a picket line, although there aren't very many of them in the country today, very, very few strikes, and strikes are don't exist. But the equivalent, what unions do, is in the realm of politics. That's where unions today can be active. And so I think it's right and proper that unions say to their members, if you're a member of this union and we elect this leadership and we decide to proceed in this way, supporting a Democrat, supporting someone else, supporting this proposition and not, then all of us should contribute to that end. That's what democracy is. You take a vote and then you all agree to do the same thing. And that, I think, is the conservatives saying, no, of course not. You should have the right to opt out anytime you want. Well, we can't opt out of paying our taxes. We all agree we have to have a police force. We have to have fire. Well, the same thing is with a union. You come together in a principle of solidarity, and it's on that basis you can have power, you can persuade people. And so I think it's right and proper that if you join and you vote for your officers and you democratically decide on how to proceed, then you're obligated to use your money or use your body for the majority, what the majority's decided to do. There's no doubt that the American labor movement's in a rough patch and that organized labor is in trouble, and union bashing is the order of the day. What's sad is that most Americans in the non-union workforce of today don't realize
the way that unions paved the way for them in the 20th century with all the things that union brought about, especially decent working conditions, the 40-hour week, overtime, all the things we've talked about. Now we've got union-busting goon governors like Scott Walker of Wisconsin trying to solve the state's financial troubles on the backs of its workers by banning collective bargaining by state workers. And this one issue finally lit a fire to the feet of organized labor, but they lost the battle, but the battle's not over. There was a recall, and the recall failed, and I think it failed rightly so because the people of Wisconsin said we shouldn't recall a governor because of a policy decision. We should only recall a governor for nonfeasance and malfeasance. And I probably, as much as I am against Walker's policies, I probably would have voted not to recall him for this because he didn't do anything immoral in this. This was a political decision, and they can always get rid of this guy and start all over again. But what do you think is the long-term outlook? And don't make it too long a term. As talking, I got some other stuff. What do you believe the long-term outcome will be regarding unions and collective bargainings in the public sector?
Well, yes, there are the Walkers, and then there's Chris Christie's in New Jersey.
But he's going to die. He's going to die. He's a walking dead man. If he thinks he's going to live long enough to be elected in 2016, he's crazy because 400-pound guys don't live that long. Anyway, go ahead.
Let me say,
we hope.
I take a sort of middle position on this. On the one hand, I think this reflected the unusual victory in 2010 of the right wing of the Republican Party in the northern states. There has been a terrific pushback, and I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, but I think that the labor movement, even unsuccessful struggles like those in Wisconsin, demonstrated the capacity of the unions and their allies to mobilize tremendous numbers against what they were doing. And in Ohio, of course, one reason I think Ohio will go for Obama is that there was a tremendous referendum about more than a year ago, which defeated a law which the governor of Ohio, conservative Republican, had put forward, limiting collective bargaining rights for public employees.
The United States has lost approximately 45,000 factories since 2001.
Yes,
About 75% of these factories employed 500 workers or more. We've lost about 6 million manufacturing jobs since 2000. U.S. manufacturing employee has been cut in half since 1959. And we've lost about 32% of mostly well-paying manufacturing jobs since the year 2000. Wages and benefits continue to fall. And how is this all going to play out?
Yeah, right. They have. Actually, one of the things that happened under Bush was this tremendous deindustrialization. We sort of forget about that. We think of that's all the 80s, but it happened under Bush. Then, of course, even more so with this financial crisis. But I have a slightly different view. I don't think anything is wonderful about a factory job. And in fact, although they used to be paid very well, you can find lots of factory jobs in America today that pay $1 more than the minimum wage. So it's not that every factory job pays $20 an hour. They don't. Okay.
Well, Romney was willing to let the automobile.
Right. No, he was.
That's pretty good paying job.
And one of the reasons that the Republicans wanted it to go was not just because they were willing to let it go, but it was a unionized industry and they wanted to bust the union. But here's what. Let me make this point. I would be perfectly happy to see the United States import all of its sneakers and TVs and everything else from China if we had high-paying service industry jobs, if we had high-paying jobs in the hospitals, if we had high-paying, steady jobs in retail and other places. In other words, I don't want to fetishize factory jobs per se. There are countries like Denmark. They don't have any factories in Denmark. They have farmers, but the farmers all get paid well, and the food processing people get paid well. So you can have countries which don't have a manufacturing sector.
Yeah, but look what Walmart's done to wages in the whole country.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If Walmart workers had their fair share of the tremendous productivity of that company, and it has because it uses computers brilliantly, they'd be making
That's
double.
all gone to the stockholders.
They'd be making double what they're making today.
That's all go to the stockholders.
Well, or actually the stockholders are the Walton family.
I'm saying, that's
yeah,
actually,
the Walton family now owns
they've
40.
made the Walton family even
100.
richer.
They're 100
That's
billion.
why I said the best thing that could happen is a missile strike on Bentonville's headquarters.
I wouldn't say that, but
I would.
100. They're worth no. But the point is you were just going on about and Obama and Romney go on about factory jobs, but I'm in favor of obviously high-paid, industry, but there's a lot of low-paid industry, and they're no better than working as a clerk at Walmart if you're only making $7.50 an hour in a factory. Well, in other words, we sort of fetishize a little bit factory jobs, and I think we have lots of other people. For example, in the retail sector, more people work in the retail sector today than in construction, in manufacturing, and in mining. Okay, which used to be good male, blue collar, high-paying jobs. Well, we now retail is where it's at. So I'm for making those good jobs.
We're China's biggest employer.
Well, that's right. Well, we are. Yeah.
45 million Americans have been pushed into poverty, and what really gets me as our poverty rolls keep growing, like you're saying, 15 million more people on Medicaid, as our poverty rolls keep growing, other countries' poverty rolls are being reduced. I mean, there are countries like Brazil,
right?
China.
Well,
I mean,
Brazil does not compete with us directly in terms of manufacturing. Although the manufacturing
but China's people are doing better because we're their biggest employer.
Brazil is a success story. What Brazil did under the Lula government, and now the successor is, they strengthened trade unions, they raised the minimum wage, they provided lots of national money to redevelop the Northeast, which is a very poor area. And so Brazil is now not exactly a middle class society, but it's doing much better than many of Latin American countries. And this is because they have increased the very bottom part of the society has been increased.
You teach college here at university, and you're renowned. Why are we teaching in our universities and colleges 700,000 Chinese nationalists to come here, learn all about the American way of life, and then go back to China and use that knowledge against us? Well, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
I don't agree with that. I don't think they use the knowledge against us. I don't. I think if anything, by coming to an American university, they learn a great deal about liberal democracy. That's one thing for sure, and they learn about being cosmopolitan sort of intellectuals. And if they go back to China, wherever they go, they tend to be a force for good there. And of course, when they're here, they paid their tuition and
but they learn a lot of stuff that's not secret. But
I know. But one of the great success stories about the United States, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a professor, is the American university system. Public and private, and I think it's terrific that we educate Chinese and Latin Americans and Western Europeans and Eastern Europeans. I think that's great, and that's a sign of strength. And then their kids will come to the United States, and of course when those tremendous success stories, Silicon Valley, they become entrepreneurs, Indians or Iranians or whatever, and they that's a tremendously good thing that America has. Now, one of the problems is that there's been an erosion, like of the University of California. The public funding has declined, and so the United States, which used to have the highest proportion of high school graduates going to college, is now number 6 or 7 in the world. And it used to have the greatest universities, and now, of course, they're in China and Western Europe. They're rivals. So I think I'm in favor of.
What's really
I'm in favor of as many foreign students as possible.
I don't want to get into that discussion because I'm against it. But anyway, a real crisis to me is that we have European firms coming to the United States, like IKEA in Tennessee, opening up these huge plants because the wages and benefits in Tennessee are terrible compared to Sweden. And now they're fighting, for a long time they've been fighting unionization in that plant. And Walmart is a great teacher. They know how to fight unions. Do you think that the union movement going to have a rebirth in our country? Is that coming? We've got about 3
Optimism
minutes.
of the optimism. I certainly hope so. I think the ingredients are there. For example, the Mexican American, entire Latino population, and some Asians. They are the union movement in America has always been a movement of immigrants from my Italian, Jewish forefathers to going back to the 19th century, the Germans and the Swedes. And so in Southern California, we have a tremendous, the entire Mexican American population is working class, and they come to their work and their lives with a sense. They remember the great revolutionary traditions of Mexico or El Salvador, and so I think that's the new labor movement we have to look to immigrants.
We're exporting a lot, though. I mean, Dell just closed a plant, the last U.S. large plant, 900 jobs to China. The company that invented cell phones, us, we no longer make any cell phones. And American employers actually now have 21 million foreign workers here. And our biggest export is now waste paper.
Well, yes, I've heard that.
We're becoming the first country in the world to decentralize, becoming the worst post-industrial nation in the world. Less Americans are employed in manufacturing than in 41. The Roman Empire's last gasps were fought on the battlefields of Iraq. And that scenario frightens the hell out of me. I think that we've got to do something to stem this outsourcing of everything that we're doing, even if it costs us temporarily.
Well, let me say this. I do. Here's why I agree with Romney to one extent. That is, the Chinese are in fact manipulating their currency. It won't solve all our problems, but the Chinese yuan should go up in value in relationship to the dollar, which would mean that Chinese product would be in effect more expensive, and they should be, and therefore you'd bring some of those jobs back to the U.S. That is an issue, and I think that the American government should make a big effort to
Nelson,
solve
I'd like
that.
to thank you for coming. We could probably go for another 2 or 3 hours, but we're going to do it again next spring. And
thank
because
you very
there's
much.
so much I like to talk with you about, because I think America needs to know what's going on the workers' side, and I think you're well equipped to give that information. It scares me that so many people are anti-union and anti-collective bargaining in this country, because it's the only thing that's going to save them once it gets down to it. I'd like to thank everybody for watching and supporting the program. Next week, we're taking a little time off for Halloween, so we will not be on. This particular show will rerun next week, so if you have any friends that you'd like to have see it, please have them look at it. The week after next, the day after Election Day, we're going to be back with an election wrap-up. I think that Mr. Obama's going to pull it out of the fire with Ohio. But I've got some bets out there, and I've even given away 25 electoral votes in a couple of instances, so I might be a lot poorer on that Wednesday after Election Day. So we'll see you next month, the day after Election Day on the 7th. I'd like to thank you for supporting us, and be careful out there.
Okay, thank you very much. That was great.